Hello, and welcome to part 1 of Regicember, where today I'm going to be using Regirock to beat the game. Now, I've never actually used the Regis before, and before doing this challenge, I actually didn't know the stats of the Regis either, so this is going to be all new for me. But before even seeing the moves that Regirock gets, I already know that it should be pretty good in this game because it is a rock type that gets rock type moves, right? But there is a bit of an issue, but we'll get to that in just a moment. First, we need to go over its stats and move pool. Regirock has 80 HP, 100 attack, 200 defense, 50 special attack, 100 special defense, and 50 speed, making it very bulky on the physical side, but also no slouch on the special defense side either. And with a 100 base attack, it's going to be hitting very hard. However, its special attack is very low. So moving on to its moves, and it gets access to mostly normal rock, fighting, and electric type moves. However, it does get Earthquake, which is very nice for its high attack stat, and it gets Thunderbolt and Thunder in case I need that type coverage. But one thing I noticed right away when looking at its moves is it doesn't have the best rock type move, Rock Slide, but it does at least have Ancient Power. Anyway, moving on to Regirock, ours has a Bashful nature. Now, something I'm going to, I think, integrate into these more versus type videos is allowing the Pokemon to have a neutral nature if its already existing nature is bad. For example, in this specific instance, the Eevee that it would have been based off of had a quiet nature, and I could always move over to the Teddiursa who has a timid nature, but unfortunately both of those are bad for Regirock, so I decided to put it to a neutral nature. You can tell me how you feel about that in the comments, but for this run of 3 videos, this is how I'm going to do it. Anyway, it gets the Clear Body ability, which prevents my stats from being dropped by things like Intimidate, and at level 10, Regirock has Explosion and Rock Throw, and the funny thing about the Regis is that in many games they are impossible to use because they only get the move Explosion, but in this game, because you start at level 10, they actually have Rock Throw already. However, that does not stop me from getting the move Seismic Toss because there are plenty of Pokemon that resist the Rock type, and if I need consistent damage, I can use Seismic Toss to guarantee it. Anyway, with that, we are now in the battle against the Old Man, where I'm able to take down the Abra in a single hit due to my extremely high attack stat. And while Rock Throw isn't enough to finish off Horsey in a single hit, it also has a fairly high defense stat, so it is still doing an incredible amount of damage. Now, the only problem with Regirock at this point in the game is that Rock Throw is 90% accurate, so there are some instances where it is going to miss, and honestly, I just don't see the need to call most of the time. So after beating the Old Man, I move on to the Power Rangers, where today I decide to fight Red because he has fire types that are weak to my rock type moves. And neither of these Pokemon hit especially hard because of my high defense. And unless Slugma gets a status effect, it's not going to be doing that much to me anyway. So I'm able to take down the Hound Tower, and then Slugma, of course, gets poison, but that's alright. I go for Rock Throw, taking it down in a single hit, and I move into the Cypher base, where I learn the move Curse at level 17, and then I run into the battle against Lavrina. She leads with a Love Disc and a Beautifly. I decide to call on the first turn, that way Rock Throw doesn't miss, but unfortunately in doing that I have taken already quite a bit of damage. I go for Rock Throw, not quite enough to take down Love Disc, in fact it's only doing a little over half, and Water Gun has already taken me down to 25 HP before I finish it off. Out comes Roselia. Absorb really isn't doing that much damage either, but it is still hurting. Rock Throw doesn't take down Roselia in a single hit, and it uses Mega Drain to finish me off. So definitely not a great first attempt, so I decide to do a little extra training until I get to level 25, where Regirock learns the move Super Power, a 120 base power fighting type move that lowers my attack and defense by 1 stage. So while it does have a huge upside, it also has a very hard downside. But luckily, the move Curse raises my attack and defense by 1 stage, basically cancelling out the issue. Unfortunately, Curse comes with its own problem of lowering my speed by 1 stage. So it's a bit of a give and pull with these moves, but I think I can make it work. Now, unfortunately, even with an attack boost, I'm not able to take down the Love Disc or Roselia in a single hit. So while I do get a little further, I don't really end up doing that much better. So while I do get to see her final Pokemon, the Shadow Delcatty, I go down soon after. So I decide to do a little bit of extra training, get up to level 27, that way I can survive the attacks a little bit more, and hopefully take down Love Disc or Roselia in a single hit. And thankfully, I do. Love Disc goes down, and then out comes Roselia, and because Love Disc went down, I know for a fact Roselia will, as long as I don't miss. And even better, Roselia misses Leech Seed, which might actually be the difference between a win and a loss in this battle. Out comes Delcatty, and the great thing about a fighting type move is I can take down Delcatty in a single hit, and that just leaves the Beautifly, which is 4 times weak to rock, so it goes down in a single hit. So with that, Lovrina is defeated, and now of course you can't have a festive holiday episode without the obligatory Mirror B, right? How are you doing, Mirror B? Well, it's always good to see you. Anyway, at the Regicember Tower I pick up my 2 favorite TMs, Hidden Power and Protect, and while I never do end up teaching it to him, it's Hidden Power Flying, so I'm not sure if I would have gotten much use out of it anyway. And after teaching Body Slam, I go into the battle against Snaddle, and unfortunately I go into this battle already half hurt, and water guns from both of them do quite a lot of damage. I'm able to take down Lantern and bring out Lunatone, but unfortunately water gun finishes me off and I lose on the first attempt, so let's go back in again, now at full health. Now the thing is that usually Quagsire wouldn't be a threat in this battle because it'd just be going for Rock Tomb. Unfortunately, because I have the Clear Body ability, it's never going to go for it because it can't lower my speed. So it's just going to go for the super effective water gun instead. Luckily, I do see that Superpower is able to take down the Shadow Lunatone in a single hit, which is always good. And I decide to go for Body Slam into Quagsire, but with my attack lowered, it's not really doing that much damage. I decide to go for Superpower into Castform, which does take it down even at -1. But now that I'm at -2, I decide to go for it once more, but it does almost nothing to Metang, and it finishes me off with Confusion. So, after another loss, I decide to go ahead and go up to Mount Battle, because I think I need to be a little tankier, because at the moment I'm getting taken down a little too easy, and in a couple levels I'll get the move Ancient Power, which I think I forgot to record, but Ancient Power is going to be very nice because, well, it has a 10% chance to raise all of my stats by 1 stage, and if that happens, I can use the move Superpower without the drawback really at all. So, after getting it on the Lantern on the first hit, I go for Superpower, which takes down the Lunatone, but now I'm back to neutral. Out comes Castform, and I want to preserve my stats for as long as possible, so I decide to go for Ancient Power to take it down. Quagsire hits another very weak water gun. I go for Superpower into Metang, taking it down in a single hit, and then all that's left is Quagsire. I am at -1, so it is going to take a few hits. But after using another Superpower and then going for Seismic Toss, I beat Snaddle, and I move on to Gonzap, who leads with an Electrode and a Nuzleaf. And because I can't do anything on the first turn because Nuzleaf is going to go for Fake Out anyway, I just decide to go for Call. And then I go for Body Slam, which takes down the Nuzleaf in a single hit, and the reason I'm keeping the Electrode alive is because it's using an 80% accurate move that only does 20 damage, so it's really not a threat. Vileplume survives an Ancient Power, but I do get the Omni boost, raising all my stats by 1 stage, but unfortunately I get put to sleep, so I will need to call this following turn in order to wake myself up, allowing Vileplume to hit me with a Giga Drain. I then go for Body Slam to finish it off, and then he sends out Whiscash. And Whiscash might actually be able to survive an attack. I decide to go for Body Slam into it, hoping to take it down in a single hit, but it actually survives on just a sliver, though it does get paralyzed. It hits Water Pulse anyway, luckily no confusion. And then I go for Ancient Power to take down Electrode this turn. Because the Whiscash is paralyzed, it might not be able to attack, but it's able to hit again, taking me down to 24 HP. I go for Body Slam to finish it off, because I don't think Skarmory can actually do that much damage to me, and so I decide to just go for Superpower to take it down, and it survives on a sliver. Steel Wing luckily only takes me down to 4 HP, and so I finish it off with Body Slam. So now with Gonzap defeated, I scale the pyramid and go ahead and pick up the move Earthquake, which I decide to teach over Seismic Toss, and then I go into the battle against Gorgon, who leads with a Lairon and a Celio. I go for Ancient Power into Celio, taking it down in a single hit, and then out comes Slowking. And I go for Earthquake, which takes down the Lairon, and nearly takes down the Slowking. Out comes Ursaring, hits a Water Pulse, luckily no confusion, and I go for Body Slam into the Slowking to finish it off, and then he sends out his first Shadow Pokemon, a Shadow Primeape, and Earthquake might be able to take it down in a single hit. Ursaring survives on a little bit, and so does Primeape. That's a bit unfortunate. Ursaring hits its own Earthquake, taking down Primeape in the process, and then he sends out his final Pokemon, a Shadow Hypno. I go for another Earthquake, finishing off the Ursaring, and doing quite a bit of damage to the Hypno. It hits a Shadow Storm, getting a crit, taking me down to yellow, and Earthquake finishes it off. So it's now moving into the final area of the game, and honestly, Regirock is doing fantastic. Even despite the few issues it had in the early game, it's still going very fast. So let's see how it does against Silver. She leads with a Gorbis and a Gardevoir, and I go for Earthquake on the first turn, which takes down Gardevoir, but Gorbis survives on just a little bit of HP. Out comes Roselia. Water Pulse hits, getting a crit, but luckily no confusion. Go for Earthquake to finish off the Gorbis and take down the Roselia. Though I don't think the crit was necessary. Out comes Farfetch'd, her first Shadow Pokemon, and Altaria, her last Pokemon. And I go for Ancient Power into Farfetch'd, that way it can't confuse me. And then all that's left is the Altaria, which really doesn't do that much damage, and Ancient Power takes it down in a single hit. Now at the top of the volcano, I run into Snaddle once again. He leads with a Metang and Quagsire. I go for Earthquake on the first turn, which takes down the Metang in a single hit, but doesn't quite take down the Quagsire. Then out comes Scizor. Quagsire goes for Waterfall instead of Mudshot because it can't lower my speed. I go for another Earthquake, which takes Scizor down to low yellow, and Quagsire gets taken down. He then sends out his first Shadow Pokemon, Shadow Solrock, which I want to get rid of as soon as possible, so I go for Superpower into it, and it actually survives with quite a bit of HP left. It's able to set up Shadow Sky, and now I need to use another turn to take it down. So I go for Ancient Power, finish it off, and then out comes Cast Form. Scizor misses a Steel Wing, which is very lucky, and I go for Earthquake to take them both down. But to my surprise, Cast Form actually survives, which is a bit unfortunate because Earthquake's damage isn't going to be maximized against Starmie, but that should be alright. I go for another Earthquake, which Shadow Storm comes out, does quite a bit to Regirock. Earthquake only does half, and Cast Form goes down, but unfortunately Regirock is slower than Starmie and goes down. So let's go ahead and just try that again. I go and reset, and unfortunately I get to the exact same spot again and hit myself in confusion. And this kept happening over and over again until I finally get to this attempt, which is perfect. Everything's right. I don't go down to a single Shadow Storm, and Earthquake should take it down in a single hit. I miss the range, and Shadow Storm gets a crit. And at this point I realized that maybe I was just being a bit stubborn. I decide to go ahead and fight a random trainer to get up to level 64, and then I use a rare candy to get up to level 65. That way I guarantee I can take down Starmie in 1 or 2 hits. And if I get an Omni Boost at any point, which in this attempt I do, I should be able to take down Starmie in a single hit, hopefully. Anyway, with that being said, I take down the Scizor. I'm leaving the Metang alive intentionally because, honestly, it doesn't really do much to me other than rarely lower my special defense, but it never ends up happening. I get a crit on Solrock, taking it down before I can set up Shadow Sky, and thus Starmie doesn't get the damage boost. I go for Earthquake, which takes down Metang and gets a crit on Cast Form, taking it down in a single hit, which is extremely nice. And then all that's left is Starmie, which, with a couple more levels, I take down with ease. So obviously just a bit of stubbornness, but I finally move on to Ardos. He leads with an Alakazam and Shadow Swallow, and unfortunately both of these outspeed me. I go for Body Slam, taking down Alakazam right away. He then sends out Kingdra, which unfortunately does have Hydro Pump, so it will do a lot of damage to me. So I decide to go ahead and try to take it down right away, and with Shadow Half I should be able to do it. Kingdra takes the hit and goes down, and then he sends out Heracross. Now Heracross is actually quite bulky, so it might be able to survive an Ancient Power, which it does on low red health. It hits a Brick Break, dealing quite a bit of damage, but I should be able to finish it off on this following turn. And Swallow decides to go for Shadow Half again. Regirock is getting very low on health, and unfortunately, it being kinda slow means that it's not likely to actually survive the Shadow Electabuzz, because it's more than likely going for Shadow Storm and taking me down. The crit was definitely not necessary though. Now I decide to teach Protect over Superpower, which is a bit unfortunate because I really wanted Superpower for the Snorlax in the back, but oh well. I go for Protect on the first turn to avoid the Shadow Half, and now at nearly full health I go for Body Slam to take down the Alakazam, then out comes the Kingdra, and every other turn I'm just going to go for Protect because it's just the safest way to get through this battle, and guarantees I get one-shots against all of his Pokemon. So I go for Ancient Power, takes down Kingdra. Then out comes the Heracross once again, and the Heracross definitely wasn't a one-shot, but with Shadow Half, it absolutely will be. Now, unfortunately, there is one Pokemon that might actually stand in the way of my plan, and that is the Shadow Electabuzz. I go for Protect, and Shadow Electabuzz is actually going for Shadow Half too. Swallow, on the other hand, goes for Shadow Sky, which is a bit annoying, but then it just decides to go for Shadow Half anyway, which means that I can take down the Electabuzz and not have to worry about it for the next Pokemon coming out, the Shadow Snorlax. Unfortunately, now that I don't have the move Super Power, I can't easily take down Snorlax, but Ancient Power is still doing over half of its health, so despite the leftovers, I think I should be able to finish off anyway. And Swallow just goes for Shadow Break, doing almost nothing. Snorlax goes down, and now to take down the Swallow, which goes for one last Shadow Half. But at this point, it's got no one to back it up, and so I take it down with ease. So now moving on to Gorgon, he leads with an Ursaring and a Slowking, and I go for Ancient Power right away into the Slowking, taking it down to low red. It hits an Earthquake, getting a crit, but it really doesn't do that much damage. I go for an Earthquake of my own, taking down the Slowking and dealing damage to the Ursaring, which almost ends up taking it down. Out comes a Slash, not really doing that much. Go for another Earthquake. Ursaring decides to protect. Aggron goes down, then out comes Walrein. And while I could go for another Protect, I decide to just go ahead and get rid of Walrein with Ancient Power, taking it down in a single hit, and then he sends out his first Shadow Pokemon, a Shadow Poliwrath, and it likes to set up Shadow Sky on the first turn. Though, because Ursaring damaged it, I think I might be able to take it down with my own Earthquake. Not quite, but it is very close. Out comes his final Pokemon, a Shadow Mr. Mime. It's able to set up Shadow Sky, and now all I have to do is hit another Earthquake, which takes down the Poliwrath, and Mr. Mime goes down with it. So with that, Gorgon is defeated. We move on to Eldis. He leads with a Shadow Manectric and Ninjask, and I go for Ancient Power right away into the Manectric, which is definitely the wrong move because I get paralyzed. And in hindsight, I think I was just being greedy, hoping that I would get the Omni boost if I just attacked it a couple times. But really, that definitely isn't the smart play. I should have just gone for the Earthquake because now I'm absolutely slower than the Salamence. So it's going to be able to attack first and deal quite a bit of damage to me. But it just decides to go for Shadow Hold on the first turn. Ancient Power takes it down to just a sliver, but unfortunately it's just not quite enough to take it down. And it hits me with the Shadow Rush, doing almost nothing actually. Maybe Salamence isn't a threat at all. But anyway, I decide to go ahead and protect this turn, just so the Shadow Sky will go away. And I go for another Ancient Power to finish off the Salamence. And once it goes down, he sends out his next Pokemon, a Flygon. Now, Flygon is actually a bit of a threat because I don't really have great damage against it. I have to use Body Slam. Though at least its Dragon Breaths don't have the chance to paralyze because I'm already paralyzed. And I actually get a paralysis on it as well. I go for Ancient Power, really hoping for that boost for Marowak, but unfortunately I don't get it. I go for Body Slam into it, dealing half of its health, and luckily it misses a Shadow End. But on the next turn it hits, dealing quite a bit of damage to me. And I finish it off with Body Slam. Now I do really need to get lucky on this next turn, then I'm able to hit Lapras, otherwise this could go very bad very quickly. Ancient Power hits, and takes it down with a crit, very nice. And then all that's left is the Ninjask, which does almost no damage to me as well. I get paralyzed, it's going to dig underground again, which is a bit unfortunate. I get paralyzed again though, so it doesn't end up mattering, and one last Ancient Power finishes it off. However, this battle could have been a lot faster had I just not gotten paralyzed right off the bat. Anyway, we now move on to the big box legendary, Shadowlugia. And right away it hits a Shadow Storm, dealing quite a bit of damage to me. I go for a Ancient Power, and it's not even doing half. Go for Protect to heal up, and then another Ancient Power to take it down to low red, and go for another Protect, and finally take it down with a Body Slam, but not before I'm taken to half health. So going into the battle against Greevil, he leads with a Rhydon and a Moltres, and unfortunately I'm still at half health. I go for Ancient Power into the Moltres, taking it down in a single hit. Then out comes Executor, and Rhydon decides to go for Shadow Hold, meaning that on the following turn it's probably going for Shadow Panic, which is really not what I want to see, and Executor is going for Shadow Storm. So this is the worst outcome of this battle. I go for Earthquake, luckily don't hit myself in confusion. I take down the Rhydon, but I'm not quite strong enough to take down the Executor. Then out comes the Tauros, but luckily due to Clear Body, Intimidate doesn't actually affect me. But I've been taken down to 15 HP, and Tauros finishes me off. Now, despite not making it all that far into the battle, I decide to go ahead and use up all my rare candies to get up to level 74, and then I try this again. Now, I of course take down the Moltres just as before, and then I go for Earthquake, now with a few more levels, and Rhydon still isn't a one-shot, which is a bit unfortunate, but luckily Regirock is able to avoid the Shadow Panic, and for some reason they decided to swap back over to Shadow End. I go for Earthquake to finish off the Rhydon and start dealing damage to Executor, then out comes the Shadow Tauros, another Shadow End. I go for Earthquake, which takes Tauros down to half, and Executor down to a sliver. It hits a Shadow in, not really doing that much damage, even with the Shadow Sky active. But now that it is active, I want to protect and stall it out until it's over. That way the Tauros has to set it up again and waste a turn doing so. Or at least that's the usual strategy, but I have something a bit different in mind. I decide to call and then use protect again, that way I can protect on the 4th turn, and then I'll only get attacked once whenever it ends. But the thing is I can use Earthquake to take them both down, and then have both legendary birds out at the same time with no Shadow Sky active, which I think is going to be the most advantageous for Regirock because I do super effective damage to both of them. So Zapdos hits me with the Shadow Bolt, luckily no paralysis, and I take down Articuno in a single hit. Now, to play it a bit safe, I do actually decide to protect here just in case it gets a critical hit. Though it doesn't, Ancient Power hits and takes it down in a single hit as well. So with that, we beat Grevel, but how well did Regirock do? Well, it beat the game at a time of 9 hours, 21 minutes, and 18 seconds at level 74, with 27 losses throughout the game. Now, I might have glossed over it a little bit, but when I said I was being a bit stubborn, I actually lost to Snaddle 6 times, and I also glossed over Ardos a bit, but I didn't want to lose superpower, so I did quite a few attempts trying to keep it, but unfortunately Protect was just way better. So I did end up losing quite a few times to Ardos as well, which definitely contributed to that. But it finds itself at the bottom of the A+ tier. I think it could definitely have room to go a little higher, but I do think that it's already a bit of a stretch to move it from the A tier to the A+ tier because the difference between it and Jolteon right now is about 10 minutes. So I think even with the mistakes that I made, it would still be in about this spot, though I could definitely see it maybe a little higher. But anyway, let's go ahead and go over the strengths and weaknesses of Regirock. The biggest thing is that it hits really hard, is very physically defensive, and has a very solid special defense stats, so it does surprisingly well against things it should be weak against. With that being said though, Rock has a lot of weaknesses, and unfortunately they get exploited pretty hard in this run. And unfortunately, Regirock doesn't get Rock Slide, and has to rely on Ancient Power, which does slow things down a bit, but Earthquake definitely helps. The other issue is that it is quite slow at 50 base speed, so even things that I should be able to outspeed by overleveling, I end up outspeeding me, which is a bit unfortunate, and also it required just a little bit of extra training to get past some of the threats it was having problems with. But I think overall it did a great job, and this should help me understand the Regis in the future videos, and I am very excited to see how the other Regis do. So if you'd like to see that, consider liking and subscribing, and if you have any Pokemon suggestions, please put them down below. Thank you so much for watching, and bye!